Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Arrests and frustration with traffic at a standstill during rush hour. The battle between commuters and old-growth protesters on some of BC's major highways. Plus, what a crypto crash means for investors.
I've never been close to hitting a 177, so for me to hit a 177 was like crazy.
And meet the Mission teen who is now the best young darts player in the country.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Some pretty disturbing revelations today in the case of a BC Riverdale actor who admitted to murdering his mother. Court has now heard the young man had a plan to kill the Prime Minister as well. Dan Burrett is live with more on this. Dan, take us through the shocking details we've learned today.
And a warning for everyone, details in this story may be upsetting to some viewers. Now, 24-year-old Ryan Grantham admitted to shooting and killing his mother in the back of the head in their home in Squamish while she played piano in late March 2020. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In an admission of facts read out by the Crown in court today, the day after Grantham murdered his mother, he loaded his car with 3 guns, ammunition, 12 Molotov cocktails, and a printed map with directions to Rideau Cottage in Ottawa, where the Prime Minister and his family live. Grantham mentioned killing Justin Trudeau in statements to police and in excerpts from his journal that were read out in court. He drove east, but only got as far as Hope before turning around amid thoughts of committing mass violence and killing people either at SFU, where he was a student, or at the Lionsgate Bridge. Later that night, he drove to Vancouver Police Headquarters to turn himself in. He walked up to an officer sitting in a squad car and said, quote, "I killed my mother." Grantham has been acting since he was 9 years old, appearing in the BC film series Riverdale, as you said, among other credits. Court heard how Grantham had escalating feelings of self-loathing, hopelessness, and a desire to commit violence in the months leading up to her murder. He was struggling with school, smoking a lot of weed, feeling anxious, angry over perceived failures, and contemplating suicide. Now, in the days leading up to the murder, he did a walkthrough of the crime. He approached his mother with a gun at least once and recorded himself on a GoPro. After he killed her, he put lit candles around her body. Her sister found her the next day. In her victim impact statement at court, Lisa Grantham said, quote, "How can I trust anybody when my only sibling chose to execute my mom when her back was turned?" Second-degree murder does carry an automatic life sentence. The Crown wants Ryan Grantham to serve up to 18 years in prison before he can apply for parole. His defense still has to make its submissions. And you can read much more on the story from our Karen Larson on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Anita.
Dan Burrett, live tonight. Thank you, Dan. A man is in hospital and a dozen people arrested after a series of connected protests during rush hour this morning. Demonstrators blocked bridges and highways in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island as they called for an end to old-growth logging in BC. As John Hernandez reports, it all led to clashes with drivers and police.
The coordinated protests by the group Save Oldgrowth started early Monday morning. On Vancouver Island near Saanich, more than a dozen anti-logging demonstrators blocked the Patricia Bay Highway. Organizers set up a ladder on the road with one man perched on top. Tensions escalated between rush hour commuters and protesters. Then the ladder collapsed.
I'm feeling really sad, quite upset because my friend was hurt today.
Police confirmed the protester was taken to hospital while several others were arrested. In the Lower Mainland, demonstrators attempted to shut down the Massey Tunnel, where more arrests were made. And in Vancouver, police intercepted 3 vehicles that were allegedly to be used to blockade the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge.
Our officers were able to locate a number of abandoned or unoccupied vehicles that we believe had been strategically placed in East Vancouver around the Second Narrows Bridge.
But one car did make it onto the bridge, along with 4 people inside. Videos show officers smashing the windows and dragging them out.
The car that did get onto the bridge, it was occupied by 4 people. And when they did get onto the bridge, the occupants attempted to lock themselves to the steering wheel. Our officers were able to quickly intervene to remove those people from the vehicles, to arrest them.
In all, protesters claim that there were more than a dozen arrests. Disruption, they say, is necessary as they call for a permanent ban on old-growth logging in the province.
We're going for maximum disruption and trying to have the government come to the table, because there's so much economic damage and public disruption that they cannot be ignored anymore.
In a statement, the province said a logging ban isn't coming, while calling these disruptions the wrong approach. But these protesters say they're prepared to keep at it until their demands are met. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
2 people are dead after a hostage situation at a Campbell River marina this morning. One of the dead is the suspect who was shot and killed by police. The Independent Investigations Office is still on scene, trying to figure out what led to an officer shooting the suspect. It started at the Discovery Harbour Marina in Campbell River just before 2 this morning. Officers responded to reports the suspect had allegedly killed 1 person and was holding others hostage. Police tried negotiating with the man for several hours. Then, just before 6 a.m., officers shot and killed the man. Anyone with information is asked to contact the IIO. Well, there seems to be more fires started by lithium-ion batteries. Now, they're used in cell phones, laptops, and e-bikes, and fire officials are warning people to be extra careful. As Leanne Young reports, they say those fires are claiming lives.
A makeshift memorial full of loving messages from friends, relatives, and a mother who's lost her son. To my boy, I will love you till the end of time. Vancouver's Shane Charlson is missed. Friends say he was a talented individual.
If it was broken, he could fix it. If you were told it was done and you couldn't do anything else with it, he'd fix it.
While Collier is mourning the loss of his friend, he's raising concerns about what killed him. Charlson died after a modified e-bike or scooter battery was overcharged and exploded in the downtown east side.
There's guys are souping up bikes with homemade battery packs, and they're taking them out separately, and they're putting higher voltage ones in the battery packs.
Officials say they recognize the concern. Lithium-ion batteries are the culprit, commonly found in cell phones, laptops, and e-bikes.
Over 70% of our fire fatalities now are being caused by these fires.
Of the 7 people who died from fires so far this year, 5 were caused by lithium-ion batteries. With improper use, they can overheat.
We always know that cooking and smoking are major risks, but this is a new risk. And this is something that we're seeing more and more use in our community, and something that we really need to pay attention to.
So this is a burned out lithium-ion battery recovered by the fire service. You can see where the initial explosion happened, and then heat started escaping from each of these cells. The fire service tells me part of the challenge with putting this out is that all of that heat is contained inside each of these. You can cool the outside, but it's hard to get anything on the inside. And the bigger your device, the more of these batteries. Even fire extinguishers may not help because they're too small. So fire officials are warning the public. Always buy quality batteries from reputable brands. Use the same device it came with to charge, replace broken cords, and never modify the batteries. It's sadly too late for Collier's friend, but he hopes others will heed the warnings. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
The number of tickets being handed out for distracted driving in BC is going up, despite dropping off during the pandemic. Police say it's all because people are unable to stay off their phones. Even hearing from drivers, they're simply bored when stopped at a traffic light. A ticket is $368 and 4 penalty points. On average, 76 people die each year in BC because of distracted driving. Pre-pandemic, ICBC saw a gradual decline in tickets with a sharp drop in 2020 as more people stayed home during COVID. While we only have last year's numbers through to May, it's projected that they went up. The RCMP says officers are issuing more tickets compared to the past 2 years. All of this has police out with a familiar warning to put the phone down when you're behind the wheel. Well, we're into the second week of a high-profile trial of the man accused of sexually extorting Port Coquitlam teenager Amanda Todd. Aidan Koban is accused of cyberbullying and tormenting the teen on and off for 3 years more than a decade ago. Our Jason Proctor has been following the trial and tells us what to expect from the new Westminster courtroom this week.
The trial began this week with more evidence from a Vancouver police officer who took the jury through the technical details of the kinds of messages that Amanda Todd dealt with while she was alive. If it seems dry, it's crucial in establishing a link between what the Crown says is 3 years of online harassment and the man sitting in the prisoner's box, Aidan Koban. Koban is accused of sextorting Amanda Todd from 2009 to 2012 when she was between the ages of 12 and 15. Prosecutors claim he came into possession of images of the teenager exposing herself and then used those to blackmail her into performing what he called sex shows in exchange for his silence. The Crown says Koban used 22 different fake social media accounts to harass Amanda Todd, sending links with graphic images to her friends, family, and classmates as she switched schools to try to start fresh. Part of the challenge the Crown faces is in tracking those messages and accounts through the maze of the internet to their original source and finding a way to make that process clear to the jury. Koban, who was extradited from the Netherlands in 2020, has pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. So far, the trial has heard from Carol Todd and Norm Todd, the first witnesses in what is expected to be a 7-week trial. Last week, the Crown called the first in a series of witnesses from the Netherlands. The Crown says Dutch police were central to building a case against Koban. They seized computers from the holiday home where he lived alone in 2014. The jury has been told that those devices held files linked to deleted videos with names like Amanda and Amanda Todd. Last week's witness testified about examining a router and finding evidence of unique identifiers of devices which access the internet through the router. The Crown has suggested Koban was piggybacking on a neighbor's router to go online. The trial is happening almost a decade after Amanda Todd took her own life. She became a key figure in the fight against cyberbullying as a result of a video she recorded before she died, describing her anguish. Koban's lawyer said outside the court last week that he hopes the public can keep an open mind about the case and about his client. Jason Proctor, CBC News, Vancouver.
The province is facing tough questions about funding for seismic upgrades. Critics wonder why more schools aren't getting money for those crucial improvements. And as Mayor Baines reports, the BC Liberals are asking why schools are left waiting while millions will be spent overhauling the Royal BC Museum.
For weeks, critics have been questioning the province's priorities on school construction projects. Parents and school boards have been told they won't receive new money for at least 7 infrastructure projects around the province. Education Minister Jennifer Whiteside was in Surrey to mark the completion of 2 seismic upgrade projects.
And happy to be here to celebrate even more improvements to schools with the completion of seismic upgrades now at both George Greenaway and Hawley elementary schools.
She repeated the government is spending $3.1 billion over the next 3 years on school projects. MLA for Surrey White Rock, Trevor Halford, was quick to remind the public the Surrey projects were already underway, but others are on hold.
The minister has made these commitments through elections, through budget cycles. Now we're seeing a freeze, and these MLAs are not speaking out in support of these projects. They're actually speaking out in favor of a $1 billion museum in Victoria.
School districts in Vancouver, Mission, Greater Victoria, the Kootenays and Maple Ridge Pint Meadows all recently learned their requests for capital funding had been denied by the Ministry of Education. Parents are frustrated over delays, including the delay to a much-awaited Vancouver school.
The province said that they would build the Olympic Village School. That's been promised for almost a decade now. It was part of the last election. They said they'd build it.
He says money had also been requested to seismically upgrade buildings at risk of collapsing in an earthquake.
If the ministry and the province wanted to build that school, they could just produce the money and that school would get built. That's not happening. Where that money comes from is a separate conversation. I just want the schools to be safe.
The BC NDP is attempting to shift attention back onto the BC Liberals with a new ad taking aim at Liberal leader Kevin Falcon.
BC Liberal leader Kevin Falcon is the politician for you. As a former real estate executive, he profited off the housing crisis. Now, his policies will make things more expensive for average people.
But it's unclear if the ad will be enough to change the political conversation. Mira Baines, CBC News, Surrey.
And just moments ago, Abbotsford Mayor Henry Braun taking to Twitter to say he will not be seeking re-election this October. This coming tonight after councillors there voted to spend billions on flood mitigation.
Senior levels of government, I think, are waiting for this, as our residents and Sumas Prairie farmers and our whole community, actually.
The first step will be to build a new pump station on the Sumas River. City staff recommended 4 plans to councillors and made a choice after public consultations. The emphasis will be on protecting agricultural land. The city, and especially the Sumas Prairie, bore the brunt of November's extreme flooding. Let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now. And speaking of wet weather and rain, although you're looking really dry right now, I know that you're watching that incoming rain. How much are we expecting?
Yeah, Anita, for parts of BC, we could be talking 80 millimeters. And we're talking about southeastern sections of BC. You're right, here across the south coast, we'll maybe see a few stray showers tonight, but we're talking about 2 very different systems impacting BC. Let me take you to the satellite and radar right now, because the severe weather is pushing over the Rockies as we speak. We've got heavy rain basically from Calgary southward. That will cross over the Rockies into southern BC through tonight, also bringing snow to the mountain passes. And I think I've got a graphic to show you that we have seen the flood watches and the high stream advisories move to flood warning for Elk Valley. So the Elk River now under a flood warning. This is where flooding is imminent. So far, the forecast with this additional rain put it at 5 to 10-year flood returns, although forecasters say 20-year flood returns not out of the question with this situation. Again, rain really just beginning to cross over the Rockies as we speak. We have widespread rainfall warnings in place east of the Rockies, but check this out. Special weather statement west of the Rockies for British Columbia. With isolated areas upwards of 80 millimeters. And you can see that mountain pass snow warning for 10 to 15 centimeters. Now, we'll see this rain push as far west as the Okanagan, where they're also under that special weather statement, but this won't make it to the south coast or the Fraser Valley. Our weather system is that low off the coast, really just bringing showers this week, which I will break down, but the imminent threat is that low moving in from the east, hopping over the Rockies for tonight through tomorrow morning, and it's expected that we will see some flooding across the southeast as our snowpack continued to melt. So, Anita, I'll break down the long-range forecast and talk about the other side of the province, and a very different story coming up in a bit.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon, Joe. Thanks.
You're welcome.
A rescue in the Salish Sea today. 4 people competing in a long-distance race between Washington State and Alaska got stuck a few hours after setting sail. Now, the racers were kayaking and sailing from Port Townsend in the grueling event known as the Race to Alaska. Their destination for the day was Victoria, but they never made it under their own power as 3 vessels capsized in bad conditions. The boaters were pulled out by the U.S. Coast Guard with the help of other nearby boaters. Race organizers say everyone made it back to land safely. Other racers have now gotten some added time to reach Vancouver Island.
If anybody's confused why we sailed a third of the way to Victoria and then back to Port Townsend, we just started slamming into waves, sort of steep-faced waves that had stacked up with the wind over tide, and we were just worried about breaking the boat. The race organizers gave us an extra 24 hours to get to Victoria, so why not use them? It looks like it's going to calm down a little tomorrow and a lot on Wednesday.
The U.S. Coast Guard says there is a gale warning and small craft advisory in effect for the area. And according to race organizers, many teams in Port Townsend are waiting for the weather to improve. Well, it's been more than a year since as many as 215 suspected unmarked graves were discovered at the former Kamloops residential school. Now the Tecumloops-Teshkwetmik First Nation is about to begin the difficult task of repatriating the remains. And as Wamish Hamilton explains, there are lessons to be learned from other First Nations who have also brought the remains of their missing children home.
It's a long way from Kamloops, BC, to Mission, South Dakota in the United States.
We're off to meet an Indigenous group that knows firsthand the pain Canada's Indigenous peoples are dealing with over missing children lost at Indian residential schools. The Rosebud Sioux Indian tribe was able to bring home the bones of their ancestral children, kids from Sichungo lands who died more than a century ago while having the Indian taught out of them.
You know, when they were taken, they were just children, and so we wanted to bring them back, and here they're protected forever.
Jessica Two Eagles' relative has finally been laid to rest in the land where he always belonged.
The veteran cemetery was kind of the perfect place for some, and then of course some of the families wanted to bury them in their home cemeteries. So
let's see who they were. There's flowers and even a toy.
Mm-hmm.
Warren Painter. Maud Little Girl.
You know, we finally have our relative home who was sent off so long ago.
The Carlisle Indian Industrial School opened in 1879 and operated for nearly 30 years, with a mission to kill the Indian and save the man. This coercion forced students to speak English, wear Anglo-American clothing, and act according to U.S. values and culture. Tuberculosis was also rampant during this time, and more than 180 students were buried at the Carlisle Indian School Cemetery.
Wait for me, guys.
Why isn't this child's actual name on this headstone?
Sydney Horselooking is now 23 years old, but back in 2015, she was a high school student learning about the Carlisle Indian Industrial Boarding School. She and other students visited the former boarding school site as part of their experiential learning.
You know, why are they still there? And that question clicked in for a lot of people, and it got them thinking, because I'm sure at the time not many people were thinking we should go get our relatives. You know, it's time to go get them. It's time to go back.
It took a group of children to motivate the Rosebud Sioux into action.
There's been a lot of people who we've come across who came up to me personally and said, you know, why are you doing this? They're dead. They've been buried. They've been there for so long. Why are you doing this? Why now? Like, what's the big deal?
What would follow was a 6-year campaign to bring home the bones of their ancestral youth. Last summer, the first 9 remains of Rosebud Sioux began their journey home from Carlisle, Pennsylvania. It was a 4-day ritual that retraced the children's original journey to the boarding school from their homeland. Once there, the remains of 3 children went directly back to their families to be dealt with in their own traditional way. Warren Paint Dirt, Lucy Take the Tail, Rose Longface, Maud Little Girl, Alvin Kill 7 Horses, and Dennis Strikes First were buried in the Tribal Veteran Cemetery. Why was the Veteran Cemetery chosen for here?
Because, you know, it's a well-kept area, and as well as we have our warriors here to protect them. We felt like that was appropriate.
One of the children's remains is related to Dwayne Hollow Hornbear's family. The idea of seeing his relative in a military cemetery, albeit a Sioux veteran cemetery, wasn't full closure for him. So it was incredibly important for him to do ceremony for his ancestor.
When he was taken from here, he was not a U.S. citizen. But when he died out there, he was put into a military cemetery. And when they were bringing him home, the talk was, where are we going to put him?
Dwayne never disclosed where he put friend Hollow Hornbear's remains. He simply went out into the land and provided his relative with what he felt was best for him.
I'm going to set his spirit free. And so I dealt with it in my own way and spoke with him in prayer and heart and said, you're home. You're home, rest here. Then,
how does it feel to know he's home now?
I'm elated, I'm happy. You know, I'm at peace now. I'm at peace, and that happiness that I've been talking about, I'm looking for, I can feel it now.
families had closure. A lot of relatives here that never spoke of their experiences in boarding school started to speak.
Christopher Eaglebear was another student on that fateful trip to Carlisle. Now 22, he offers what bringing home the children means to both the young ancestors and him.
I felt like these spirits can finally stop crying, stop mourning, and hopefully go see their families, and if not, come back around and be reborn into this world again, but live the life that they're supposed to live, you know, free and a child.
Hey, come on, Spot.
So what did we learn from the Rosebud Sioux? How is their struggle to repatriate the most vulnerable people in their history applicable to the Canadian context still unfolding?
I really want to encourage the Canadian people to pay attention to the youth, you know, bring them to the next meeting, encourage them to pay attention, and if they are, then listen to see and hear what they have to say. Maybe they have good ideas that you haven't heard of yet.
Learn your history and your own personal history, your family history that you can share and saying, this is who this relative was, and share it. Share it, don't be afraid to share it.
I would just say, if you come across a descendant of somebody who's either, you know, who's been affected by boarding school, is just to give them a hug and let them know that it's okay. That this isn't a big secret no more. It's out, word's out.
In Canada, we will eventually run out of uncovering buried anomalies. So what's next? The Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc were the first to discover a pattern beneath the ground. They have also become the first to begin the process of revelation. Canadians and people around the world nervously await what they will find, and if they are the remains of children who were snatched from their parents and died far from home, we have the Rosebud Sioux to thank for showing us one possible way forward.
I feel like it definitely opened the eyes, like, for the community, and a lot of healing that still needs to be done, that needs to take place.
Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, South Dakota.
We have some breaking news to tell you about. CBC News has learned that the federal government is set to drop vaccine mandates for domestic travel on planes and trains. Also affected by this change, outbound international travelers no longer needing the vaccine. Now, those mandates have been in effect since October 30th of last year. The federal government has been under pressure to ease rules by both industry and the opposition, and as a way of speeding up delays and lineups at airports. Stock markets sank today with fears over high inflation spooking investors, but cryptocurrency led the downward trend. We look at that next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. 1 year after the Toronto Catholic School Board made an historic move to recognize Pride Month, some parents are disappointed with a lack of celebrations this year. Take a look.
Eloise Morrison helped raise the pride flag at St. John Catholic School in the Upper Beaches last year. It's the same school she attended and where her two sons go now. However, she's still waiting for the school to mark Pride this year.
For this year, for it not to happen on June 1st or festivities not to be in place bigger than it was last year, it was a huge letdown, a huge disappointment.
Morrison reached out to the school in May asking about Pride plans. She says there was none.
Raising the Pride flag last year, 2021, was very important for my family and I.
She grew up with an openly gay father and at one time felt shame because her school called being gay a sin. That's why marking Pride is so important to her.
Because it was at this school where I felt marginalized.
The Toronto Catholic District School Board voted in 2021 to fly the rainbow flag outside of its offices and all schools from June 1st to the 30th. But it doesn't keep track whether the schools raise the flag or not. The board says in a statement most TCDSB schools conducted flag-raising ceremonies at the start of the month. However, school communities continued to host Pride celebrations throughout the month of June.
The fact is that this was clearly forgotten.
Rebecca Hooton, an LGBTQ advocate, says it's important students see themselves represented.
Queer and trans students and staff and families attending this school are not a priority. And that's the real crux of the problem. It's not the date, it's the thought behind it.
As CBC was interviewing Morrison, school staff came outside to place a flag on the fence. It was raised today, and the school says it's planning a ceremony on June 16th. Morrison feels it's still an afterthought.
And I'm hopeful that that celebration will be a beautiful one to remember, so that the students who feel marginalized will be able to feel comfortable.
Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
Stock markets took a sharp decline today, and the effect on cryptocurrencies has been especially dramatic. As Anita Bathe reports, investors who once saw it as an exciting space are now fleeing.
From movie stars,
fortune favors the brave,
to social media,
buy the dip, guys, buy the dip.
Boom shakalaka.
There's been no shortage of influencers pushing crypto, and investors have been buying it.
Cryptocurrencies are still kind of an emerging market that people were trading when they were feeling good, when they were enthusiastic, when they were willing to take on risk.
But as central banks started to raise interest rates, investors fled risky assets, prompting a crypto collapse.
When markets are volatile, volatility goes both ways.
Amid a backlog of trading orders, the largest crypto exchange, Binance, paused withdrawals briefly. Another, Celsius, froze withdrawals, meaning investors can't take out what's left of their money. According to Radio-Canada, late last year, Quebec's pension plan invested $150 million in Celsius. The group says it's monitoring the situation. Luca Rosenberg-Lee started investing in crypto 5 years ago.
It is a bit scary, obviously, to think of the coins that are supposed to be stable going up and down, but at the same time, it's crypto. You've got to be prepared to stomach the situation.
The Bank of Canada says that from 2020 to 2021, the percentage of Canadians investing in Bitcoin rose from about 5 to 13. Policymakers recently issued this warning.
We don't see cryptocurrencies as a way for Canadians to opt out of inflation or as a stable source of value.
And though Canada has some robust regulations, experts say there's room for improvement.
There needs to be maybe some heightened disclosures around conflicts of interest.
Just one way to protect investors in a space that can come with great risk. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
To help us make sense of the crypto coin volatility, I'd like to bring in Gray Williams. They're a tech expert and crypto market watcher. Gray, thanks for joining us.
Always glad to be here.
What do you make of what's happening right now?
To be honest, this is something I think a lot of people have been fearing and a lot of people have been predicting. It's being referred to as crypto winter. Not the first time that we've seen something like this, but seeing the crypto market slip this hard following the stock market down it's pretty disappointing for a lot of people.
What about critics who say these investments don't act like currency and they aren't tied to actual products or businesses like stocks in a company, and that these are just a speculative asset? What do you say to those people?
In a lot of cases, they're actually correct, but in a lot of cases, they're also not correct. There are cryptocurrencies that can be minted, forged essentially for almost any reason on a blockchain. The blockchain technology that's behind this isn't just used for cryptocurrencies. So when they're saying that these are, speculative assets, in some cases, again, they are. But looking at that market, when we're seeing this when there are projects that are based around tokens and based around cryptocurrencies. When they're promising to do something, to deliver a product, whether it's financial or otherwise, some cryptocurrencies and some tokens have, and others famously have not.
Well, and they are subject to regular market falls and raises, right? Because is it, what's happening in the Ukraine and interest rates that are having an impact here?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, anytime the idea of war, especially something that could escalate, comes into play, I think people become a little bit more trepidatious about what it is that they do with their assets, whether those assets are, real, their car, their home, or virtual. These are kind of following very similar rules. So for people who have invested in cryptocurrencies and tokens in a speculative way, seeing confidence in these different markets so almost evaporate, I think has really sent people into what felt like a panic sell at the beginning, but seems like a low, relatively slow descent into almost panic-driven madness at this point.
Well, and not everybody who invests actually really understands it, right? So what do you say to investors who perhaps didn't know much but were enticed to enter the market after the flurry of crypto ads we've been seeing, like actor Matt Damon or, people getting hacked on Instagram?
I feel for folks who have sort of entered that cycle. The first thing that I was taught as a kid when you're talking about investments is don't invest anything that you can't afford to lose. When you have high value productions, they're really trying to tell you that these things are going to be the next thing. It's hard, I think, to avoid that hype and avoid that excitement. But that doesn't absolve individuals of doing the work, doing the research and figuring this out. If you got in here because it looked really good and you didn't do your homework and you didn't understand what you were getting into, unfortunately now you're kind of reaping what you had sowed before. So that's rough advice to hear, but like now would be the time to go and do that work if you haven't done it already, to know what it is that you have in your hand and in your wallet.
Gray Williams speaking to us about cryptocurrency tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure.
He drove down pedestrians in Toronto. Now the van attack killer has been sentenced to life in prison. The harrowing victim impact statements coming up.
New Taste Coke. What began with great fanfare seems to have lost some of its fizz. In the U.S., some die-hard Coke fans are so opposed to the new taste, they've started hoarding the old Coke and reselling it, reportedly for up to $100 a case. It's getting harder and harder to find. But here, in this Burnaby warehouse, amid boxes and boxes of coffee, sit 73 lonely cases of, you guessed it, the real thing. No, this isn't a secret stash. The folks at Rondale Coffee Service, a local supplier, are trying to get rid of the stuff. They placed an ad in the paper, and for just $15 a case or 63 cents a can, they'll sell it to anyone who wants it.
Well, basically, we want to move the stock. It helps us to move it, and the sooner we move it, the better it is for us. So we're looking for a little markup, but nothing substantial.
Rondale customers at this office made sure they got dibs on the real thing before the dwindling supply dries up.
I do prefer the old stuff because the new stuff seems really flat, like there's no bubbles to it anymore. It seems like they've just taken out the bubble.
The new stuff's much flatter, and it's a different color as well, but it doesn't give you that same tingle that the old Coke gives you.
If we're talking about loyalties, me personally, I don't prefer the new Coke or the old Coke. I prefer another version of the stuff, the Diet Coke. And while Coke hasn't announced any plans to come out with a new taste Diet Coke, I'm not taking any chances. Kelly McClugan, CBC TV News, Vancouver.
Okay. You ready? Okay, draw the pins, please. On your mark, get set, go.
Brewers here, and we also have
Hey, you guys know. Going strong.
You taking this one? Taking this one on too?
No, the other way. Hammer.
16 to McDonald's Chevron. Those two cars have eliminated.
What was fun about it?
Well, just racing down and suddenly like you're going straight and suddenly go down and you go fast and then the speed bumps go bump, bump, like that.
Were you scared?
My practice when I was, but then after that I wasn't.
In its second day, the U.S. Congressional Committee on the January 6th Capitol attack put the focus squarely on Donald Trump, how he stoked emotions and how he persistently rejected his closest advisors who told him he lost a fair election. Susan Ormiston has the latest on these historic proceedings.
With a laser focus, the January 6th committee shredded Donald Trump's stolen election theory.
The Trump campaign legal team knew there was no legitimate argument, fraud, irregularities, and yet President Trump went ahead with his plans for January 6th.
I said, Mr. President, there are
evidence including damning words from his former attorney general debunking the fraud.
I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit.
There was no mysterious suitcase in Georgia stuffed with ballots for Biden, nor thousands of dead voters in Pennsylvania.
That was absolute rubbish. And it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue.
Multiple people warned Trump there was no proof, including a White House lawyer.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts.
Thank you.
Trump had set the stage for his loss on election night.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Influenced by an allegedly inebriated Rudy Giuliani, advising him to declare victory early over the objections of Trump's own campaign manager.
I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Trump continued to peddle fraud right up to January 6th, inciting supporters who believed in the steal because he had told them.
Fake election.
What if the election's being stolen? What is it going to take?
You'll hear detailed testimony from
the January 6th committee infers Trump deliberately conned supporters and tapped them for their money.
The big lie was also a big ripoff.
That's the CBC's Susan Ormiston reporting tonight. Now, the man responsible for the deadly Toronto van attack 4 years ago has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. It comes after the court heard victim impact statements today from survivors, family and friends of victims, and community members. As Stephen D'Souza reports, they described how their lives changed on April 23rd, 2018.
An ordeal that began 4 years ago is set to come to a close as survivors and family of the victims of the Toronto van attack face the killer in court.
It haunts everybody in there. Their life will never be the same, but this hopefully provides some sort of closure as best as it can.
Michelle Kelman was a friend and was with Andrea Braddon when she was struck. She was one of 11 who were killed.
There was this huge weight that was lifted from my shoulders. In saying that, I mean, he's in there today. It's very difficult to be saying those words in front of him, but it was necessary.
Alec Manassian sat often with his head down. He was found guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. The attack by a 25-year-old seeking fame, angered by women who wouldn't sleep with him, fueled by a hate fed by the depths of the internet. Charlene Mackay was a bystander who tried to help the victims. She spoke of the emotional trauma that's never far from the surface.
It's in everything that you do every day. It's always present. It's always ready to erupt.
Many fought through tears as they spoke of the emptiness they feel. Rocco D'Amico, the father of victim Anne D'Amico, told the court, "The daily tears my family continues to shed would overflow this courtroom. I long for the day this pain might diminish." After the statements, Manassian was sentenced to life with no chance of parole for 25 years. He received the same sentence for all 10 deaths, plus the one victim who died after his conviction. He received 20 years for the attempted murder charges. All sentences run concurrently. Some said today it was impossible to forgive, and they hope he never sees freedom.
He has as little happiness as possible because he's robbed so many of us of having that full happiness and joy of movement in life.
As one survivor said to the perpetrator in a statement read in court, "You don't deserve mercy. You don't deserve a second chance." Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
100 million Americans are being told to stay inside. Sweltering heat warnings and dangerous conditions. We take you south of the border next. Different story here at 6:45. A live look at Cranbrook at the St. Eugene Resort and Casino. Soggy conditions there as rain batters southeastern BC. Johanna has a look at the weather there and a look ahead at the week to come next.
The flashing lights of thousands of male fireflies light up the dusk. They are hoping to impress their female audience. While it may look spectacular to us, these females are not easily impressed. They are looking for something special. Males that can sustain a long flash. This female has spotted a male with potential, so she opens the conversation by emitting a flash of her own. This is good news for the male. He's been trying for several nights to impress a female, and the clock is ticking. He climbs a nearby grass stem and continues the conversation. He will only approach if she responds with a specific light pattern. It looks like this male has what it takes. She chooses a male with a long flash because it means he has a larger nuptial gift, food for her developing eggs.
U.S., an early season heat wave is rolling east after blasting several southwest states over the weekend. Temperatures are climbing well into the 30s and 40s in some parts, affecting more than 100 million Americans. Here's Belle Puri on how they're holding up or getting ready.
Millions of Americans across dozens of states are feeling the heat.
It's like an oven. I'm like so hot. I try not to go out because of the heat as well.
It's predicted that by midweek, about 100 American cities could see record highs for this time of the year. Already, Las Vegas hit almost 43 degrees, Phoenix 45, Washington, D.C. 33, and Philadelphia 35. Many cities are under excessive heat warnings. And with that heat and humidity come fears of health risks to the most vulnerable, to outdoor workers, and to those without access to air conditioning. For many, heat relief centers are the only option.
We have seen a lot of heat exhaustion just come in, and that's where the cots come involved, that they could just rest and get rejuvenated, and we monitor them as well.
A half marathon in Brooklyn on Saturday saw a tragic illustration of the danger. One runner collapsed and died. 16 others were taken to hospital. The heat is a huge contrast from just 3 weeks ago when, late in May, 50 centimeters of snow fell in Colorado.
There you go, Corey.
That same storm spawned tornadoes in Michigan and thunder on the eastern seaboard. Earlier than normal and prolonged heat waves are also a challenge for power supply. Columbia University climate change expert Romany Webb has a warning.
Unless we really fundamentally rethink the way that we plan and design and operate our systems, it's going to be more rolling blackouts, longer lasting outages, and everybody's going to sort of feel more pain.
Now more than 100 million Americans are under some form of heat warning or advisory. The historically high June temperatures show no sign of letting up. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with our forecast. Joe, definitely not seeing that kind of heat here, but still a beautiful day for us.
Yeah, we did have a decent one, Anita. Temperatures still just a touch below seasonal, but such an eerie reminder of where we were at just a year ago, waiting for that heat dome to start in about 2 weeks from now. Take a look at the current temperatures. Could not be farther from where we were yesterday, as we're still under the influence of La Nina, expected to continue with cool temperatures until possibly mid-July. 16 right now through YVR. Our seasonals, based on our 1991 to 2010 averages, 19. So yes, we are well below for the season, and we'll continue to see those cooler temperatures. Just a quick update on those warnings. Special weather statement for most of southeastern BC. Snowfall warning for our mountain passes. We're sort of in between two systems. We have this big Montana low pushing east to west over the Rockies that we talked about earlier, bringing flood risks and flood concerns. That low spinning off our coast, that will be our story on the south coast for the next couple of days. So you can see the system pushing in from the east, actually bringing a good amount of rain to the southeast, the Kootenays through the Okanagan, getting 20 to 40 millimeters. But the best we'll see on the far west coast is just a few sprinkles tonight and maybe through tomorrow morning. But you can see that broad circulation over the next 24 hours before that system pushes east Wednesday. And then you can see just off our coast to the west, another little low pressure system hinting at some rain for the weekend. But at this point, a bit of a question mark, I've got to say, for a weekend. One of the most consistent models for us, showing almost dry skies continually through to early Monday. One thing's for certain, it's going to be a nice day across central and northern BC if you're looking for dry weather. 14 in through Prince Rupert, much deserved. Morning showers for us. We'll see the sun in the afternoon. And then check this out, Anita. There's a nice little warm up. We can almost get rid of the parka by the end of the weekend. What do you think?
How'd you know I still had it out?
I know you. I know you still got it.
All right. Looking forward to that, Joe. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bullseye, how a 17-year-old from Mission beat out the competition to be named Canada's best youth darts player. That's next.
If I go to an electronics store and they refund me, I pick up the camera and walk out, it's theft.
Alan Tessier sold his camera in late February, but it wasn't at an electronics store. The sale took place on eBay, but Tessier didn't have the money or the camera to show for it.
It's $1,125. I mean, it's, if it was a pair of shoes for $30, you'd say, well, live and learn. And it's just a matter, I mean, if you've been refunded somewhere, somehow, there's an obligation, and I feel eBay should do more.
Tessier is an avid photographer who loves to take pictures of wildlife, especially birds. He's used eBay for roughly 2 decades and says he's bought and sold more than 100 items. This time was different. eBay gave the buyer a refund after they decided the camera wasn't what they wanted, but Tessier's camera was never returned.
I've tried emailing the buyer, and it comes back as undeliverable. So I can only guess that he may have left eBay, or eBay and I are kind of not on good terms anymore.
Daniel Chai is a consumer advocate and Toronto-based business lawyer.
To me, this is a situation of seller beware.
He says eBay's policies don't include much protection for people selling.
Those agreements tend to be heavily weighted towards eBay and also the buyer. And ultimately, in this case, the seller's been left holding the bag.
In a statement to CBC, eBay says its users are protected by its policies, transaction monitoring, and data systems. The company says it spoke with Tessier and the issue was resolved amicably. After 3 months of waiting, Tessier received notice eBay would pay him what he's owed. He says it's great news, but Chai says the case offers lessons for anyone buying or selling online.
Well, if it's happening to this seller, that he's been out a very significant amount of money on this item, it's probably happening to other people. eBay should step up and protect these sellers as much as they are protecting the buyers. And with that being the case, sellers have to be that much more mindful and conscious of protecting themselves from potential scams or buyers who are just being jerks.
Dan Takema, CBC News, Ottawa.
A 17-year-old from Mission has beat out teens from across the country to be crowned the top youth darts player in Canada. Samantha Ponak managed to log what many players consider to be the perfect score. Gianpaolo Mendoza caught up with the champion at her home base in Abbotsford.
I've never been close to hitting a 177, so for me to hit a 177 was like crazy.
177.
And it was like, oh my gosh, like it's something I've never ever thought about even attempting to hit, let alone actually hitting it. My name's Samantha Ponak. I'm 17 and I just won the senior female youth singles at Nationals in Toronto. So I'm now first in Canada for senior singles youth. So 177 is a triple 19 and then 2 triple 20s. It's quite difficult for some people to hit one of the triples. I don't know anyone at Nationals and youth that's hit a 177. I've seen it on TV at the adult ones. I don't think I've seen it with the youth. So how I prepare myself is I play the board. I tell myself, play the board, not the opponent. Otherwise, I will start to mimic what my opponent does, and that kind of messes up my game. My parents have been playing for like about 20 years. One day I wanted to play, so I picked up some darts and I just threw them, and he's like, oh, you kind of actually have like a natural throw. And then ever since then I just kind of started playing at home, and then the youth league opened up in Abbotsford. I enjoy most is the community of darts. Everyone's different, everyone's welcoming. It's just like, as to me, a second family. This is all what we love to do, and yeah, it's just something we enjoy, hanging out, playing darts down here at the hall.
Congratulations on the win. That's amazing. And that is it for CBC Vancouver News tonight. Thanks for being with us. We are back here at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.